Good morning. I hope that this day finds you all well and that things are going in a good direction for you. We live at the beginning of spring now. It is the first day of March, and I hope that the sun is shining and some good things are ahead for us. Certainly we live in a very interesting time. When Jesus was establishing his will, directing people to his way, he made the statement at one point, we see it in Matthew 16, that I will build my church. He had in mind that his followers would make up this body of believers so that they themselves would be the representatives of him on this earth. Yesterday in my sermon, I talked about the church, and I asked, what is the church? And historically, in the churches of Christ, we have talked about the identity of the church in terms of some doctrinal issues that indeed are very important, and we cannot ignore those in any way. But I think sometimes we have made the church, we have followed a model of the church that really is not the model that Jesus had in mind when he said that he would build it. So we ask the question today, what does that church look like? I do this because it's important for each of us to come to terms in what it means to be a follower of Jesus and what we together are supposed to represent. Historically, the what has been called the church has gone through a number of phases, and it's looked different ways at different times. For a very long period of time, what was known as the church was represented by the robes of the ecclesiastical authorities, by the ornate temples and tabernacles that were built. It then became the church, as it was known in the eyes of people, became a very divided body and divided people, fighting over various points of doctrine and becoming between themselves more of an enemy even than Satan himself was in the world. The church, as it has been called by people, the church has had a lot of looks. So for the next 3 days, I want to look at this model. I want to look at the model first that we call the American model, the American church. Let's just put it in context. And what do we picture? It usually is a very neat, clean, sweet little building in a quiet place, the church on the corner where everyone smiles. We can almost picture it. It probably ought to have a white picket fence around it and make it just that sweet little church on the corner in a quiet neighborhood in each American city. What a nice setting. I think it might be especially appropriate for us to underscore it was a white picket fence, because inside the people were mostly all of one color. In one part of town, they were mostly all white. In another part of town, they were mostly all black. We have seen such division between races within what we call the church that I wonder if Jesus would even recognize that. It's awkward for us to put that in context. It's been said that Sunday mornings are the most segregated hours in America, because where there is white, it is white, and where there is black, it is black. I think we're overcoming that. I think I hope our churches are becoming, starting to look more like the neighborhoods, the cities that they are in, a cross-cultural group of people, all followers of Jesus, each surrendered to his will, but not making race the dividing point. The concerns for this American church were mostly very simple. Most churches were pretty much alike, except for a few doctrinal variations that separated them. Most of them, and the way that the people like to picture them, were actually just these nice little churches where nice people met to talk about nice things and to be with other nice people. Contrast this with what Jesus was talking about when he was talking about his followers. He talked about things like picking up your cross and suffering. And he had the courage, the gall, if you will, to commission the church to go out and reach out to other people who were not exactly like them, and to minister to people who had needs that were far beyond what we find on that nice little quiet corner in a quiet little town somewhere in America. It was much more difficult than that, because Jesus said, as you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. And therefore that quiet little church on the corner, I hope, began to feel some guilt pangs for not reaching out. But this American model, and I bring this up because this is important for us to understand, this is the model that many older Americans grew up with. This is the church that makes them very comfortable. And that sweet little setting is very attractive to those people. They would rather the church just remain a group of nice people doing nice things for other nice people. They would rather there not be any boat rocking, if you will, boat rocking activity like bringing children in from the neighborhood, and might make things more chaotic, or tending to the needs of those who are dirty or poor or broken, those that Jesus was talking about when he talked about the very least of these, my brethren, talking about people who were coming from an entirely different part of the world, a different mindset altogether, and yet this is what God's people were called to do. The truth is, God's not calling us to be this American model church. Christ did not die for that white picket fence. God's plan isn't for us to be comfortable. In fact, what he wants us to do goes so far beyond that quiet little corner in a quiet little town somewhere in America. He calls for us to be very active. He calls for us to be in the world, but not of the world. He calls for us to be people who are really looking like Jesus as he went from place to place and attracting to himself people who they were broken, people who were misfits, people who just didn't fit in with the rest of society. Jesus was there for those people. And then he turns around and he says, now come, follow me. This American model church is sweet and kind and nice, but it's not biblically accurate. And it certainly doesn't look like Jesus. So I want us to think beyond that. I don't want us to be trapped into thinking that that's what church is supposed to be. And if people have this inclination, they want to go back to the way things used to be, if that's what they're picturing, then that's not where we need to go. I want us to be very positive about this. I don't want this to be a negative message. I just want to say that God is calling us to be so much more than the American model church. Tomorrow we're going to talk about a different model. Quite a different model. It's Satan's model for the church. Because contrary to common thinking, in a world ruled by Satan, there might not be an absence of churches. As a matter of fact, I think Satan uses churches in many ways to serve his own purpose. And so we'll talk about Satan's model tomorrow. But for today, I just want you to think about the importance of what it is for us to be followers of Jesus. We're not supposed to look like any sweet little model church sitting on the corner in a quiet little place. We are to be followers of the Christ who came and transformed the world. And he has commissioned us to do that. I hope today you'll start thinking about what that means in your life. Let's make this a great and productive day for the kingdom of God. Bye.
They resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Words of life, words of hope.